This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, President of the Higher Council of the Judiciary, has chaired the opening ceremony of the new judicial year 2024-2025. And Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf has received today here in Algiers a delegation from the National Security and Foreign Policy Committee of the Iranian Islamic Consultative Council, or Shura, led by the chairman of the committee, Ibrahim Azizi. Several Palestinians were killed in new bombardments carried out today by the Israeli occupation against the town of Rafah in southern part of the Gaza Strip. And those were the major developments. Now the full news edition. Good afternoon. The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, President of the Higher Council of the Judiciary, has chaired the opening ceremony of the new judicial year 2024-2025. The President of the Republic was welcomed upon his arrival at the Supreme Court by the Minister of Justice, Keeper of the Seals, Mr. Lotfi Boujama'a, and the first President of the Supreme Court, Mr. Tahar Mamouni, as well as members of the Supreme Court and the States Council. In his speech made on the occasion, President Tebboune said Algeria has completed the building up of a republican judicial system fortified by the people's trust. He said the constitutions or the institutions of the republic are strong thanks to loyal and honest men and women, notably the judges. He said the state has taken major steps to restore trust and consolidate the requirements of governance. The president said since the entry into force of the new constitution, the status of justice and the independence of the judiciary has been strengthened. He highlighted that the new legislative texts embody his commitments to the people to moralize public life and relentlessly combat corruption and deviations. President Tebboune then commended the commitment of the justice sector workers to their moral and professional duty and their awareness of the trust placed upon them to reinforce the rule of law. The president added that efforts to modernize the justice sector had improved its performance and contributed to overcoming traditional bureaucratic methods. The president sees the opportunity to emphasize that currently Algeria call was heard. You still listen to Radio Algeria International. The president said or emphasized that currently Algeria's call was heard by honest people in the world to hold accountable the killers of the Palestinian people. He also expressed thanks to honest people across the world, notably South Africa, for its stance with justice. And the President of the Republic also has chaired a cabinet meeting to give instructions to the members of the new government yesterday. And Mariam Bershi has the details.
The President welcomed the government's members, notably the newly appointed ministers. President Tebboune reiterated the importance for the government to fulfill its commitments to the people and fully implement the presidential program. He stressed the importance for the ministers to carry out the task they have been entrusted with and implement them in the best possible way at the service of the citizens. The President then insisted on the government to continuously find solutions to raised concerns with the required speed and necessary professionalism. He also instructed the government to prepare action plans to be presented to the Council of Government and then the Council of Ministers. He highlighted that all government's efforts should focus on the needs and comfort of citizens. Prime Minister Nadir Arbawi, for his part, expressed thanks to the President of the Republic for his renewed trust, pledged to do his best to implement the President's program in the best possible way.
And earlier, the President of the Republic has signed the 2025 Finance Law.
The signing ceremony took place at the headquarters of the Presidency of the Republic in the presence of senior state officials. Following the signing ceremony, the President of the Republic took a photo with the members of the new government. The law, which was approved by the Council of the Nation on November 16th and the National People's Assembly on November 13th, includes several legislative measures aimed mainly at promoting investment, strengthening the national economy, boosting the purchasing power, and improving the living conditions of citizens. The law expects a 3.5% increase in state budget revenues, or 8,523.6 billion Algerian dinars, while expenditures will increase by 9.9%, or 16,794.61 billion Algerian dinars. The law was prepared on the basis of a reference price of $60 per barrel of oil during the 2025-2027 period and $70 as an estimated market price per barrel of crude oil. According to the indicators included in the law, the national economy is expected to achieve a growth rate of 4.5% next year, while growth outside hydrocarbons is expected to reach 5%. The Constitutional Court had informed the President of the Republic of its decision declaring the unconstitutionality of the amendments introduced by the National People's Assembly to Articles 23, 29, 33 and 55 of the Finance Law for the year 2025, approved by Parliament. This comes after receiving 2 notifications from the Speaker of the Council of the Nation and the Prime Minister related to the constitutionality of the amendments included under Articles 23, 29, 33 and 55.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and the Minister Delegate to the Minister of National Defense and Army Chief of Staff, Army General Said Shengriha, is on an official visit to the state of Kuwait at the invitation of the Army General Chief of Staff of the Kuwaiti Army, Bandar Salam al-Muzayin. During the meeting, which is part of the strengthening of cooperation between the armies, the two parties will examine issues of common interest. The Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf has received today here in Algiers a delegation from the National Security and Foreign Policy Committee of the Iranian Islamic Consultative Council, or Shura, led by its chairman of the committee, Ibrahim Azizi. The meeting focused on the examining of the current state and future prospects of the cooperative existing relations between the two brotherly countries. It also explored ways to enhance parliamentary diplomacy mechanisms to raise these relations to their highest potential. The two parties discussed several regional and international issues of common concern, notably the latest developments in the Middle East region in the face of the ongoing genocide in Gaza and the relentless Israeli aggression. Earlier, the Iranian delegation met with the Speaker of the National People's Assembly, Ibrahim Boughali, who stressed that Algeria and Iran share historic relations based on sincere brotherly ties and willingness for a closer cooperation, highlighting the constant efforts of the two countries to strengthen their relations. You still listen to Radio Algeria International, and the Iranian official also stressed that the visit was an opportunity to examine the state of the bilateral relations as a whole and to promote them while broadening and diversifying their economic cooperation. Mr. Boughali reaffirmed the right of the Palestinian people to establish their independent state with Al-Quds as its capital, and also addressed the question of Western Sahara, reaffirming the right of the Sahrawi people to self-determination. For his part, Mr. Ibrahim Azizi stressed the urge to put an end to the crimes of genocide committed against the defenseless Palestinian people by the Israeli occupation, praising Algeria's positions in favor of the oppressed Palestinian people and its constant pleas for this just cause. Mr. Azizi stressed the need to strengthen the bilateral relations and broaden cooperation. You still listen to Radio Algeria International. The 70th session of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly is taking place in Montreal with the participation of a delegation of the Council of the Nation. A communique issued by the Council of the Nation indicated that the participants in the meetings of the standing committees would discuss a number of issues, including the challenge of combating disinformation, history and threatened identities, the protection of cultural heritage during armed conflicts, dual-use technologies, trade, society, and national security challenges, as well as NATO and the countries of the South. The delegation includes the chairman of the National Defense Committee and senator. As a reminder, the Algerian Parliament regularly takes part in NATO meetings in its capacity as a Mediterranean partner member. Still with national news, and Algeria's ambassador to Turkey, Ammar Belani, has stressed in Istanbul the significant and remarkable development of the Turkish-Algerian relations since 2020, inviting Turkish investors to come in large numbers to seize the opportunities offered by the Algerian market. While speaking at the first edition of the Algerian-Turkish Forum, which has been taking place for 2 days in Istanbul, with the participation of the Turkish Trade Minister and businessmen, economic players and academics from both countries, Mr. Belani hailed that the state of relations between the two countries had become strategic since the decision taken by the two presidents on the occasion of President Erdogan's visit to Algeria in November 2023. Underlining the significant and remarkable progress made since 2020, the Algerian ambassador pointed out that Turkey is the leading foreign investor in Algeria in the non-hydrocarbon sector with an estimated value of $6 billion. The Turkish trade minister, for his part, hailed the high quality of the existing bilateral relations and expressed his country's authorities' will to strengthen them, notably in the economic sector, saying that this forum would certainly help to achieve the objectives set out by the two countries' leaders. You still listen to Radio Algeria International and to the Middle East. Now, several Palestinians were killed in new bombardments carried out today by the Israeli occupation against the town of Rafah in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. The news agency Wafa said several others were wounded in the attack, bringing to 24 the number of people killed for the past 24 hours. More than 70 others were wounded in the attack, raising to over 44,000 the number of Palestinians killed since the Israeli occupying authorities launched their operations on Gaza over 1 year ago. This came as UNRWA reiterated that Gaza's population was facing serious shortages of food and water on account of the continued acts of aggression carried out by the Israeli occupation against the enclave. UNRWA spokesperson in Gaza, Louisa Watridge, stressed in a message posted on social media that the situation was deplorable and worse than ever before. She said that the people were fighting for food amid relentless bombardments that exacerbate their sufferings. In this connection, the agency's media and communication official in Gaza, Ines Hamdan, warned that famine was looming in the territory.
Unfortunately, there is deterioration even at the nutritional level. We are talking about high levels of food insecurity. Malnutrition is multiplying by 10 times. According to the latest reports, famine is unfortunately imminent. Water is another crisis. 70,000 people are trying to have clean water, and sometimes they cannot because the infrastructure was destroyed. The sewage network was destroyed. Most of the wells that are supposed to pump drinking water were destroyed. We continue to provide this aid, although it is little and despite all the challenges that are facing in the way of humanitarian work. We have demanded that the flow of aid be sufficient and in the required quantities and requested the protection of humanitarian workers for months.
Meanwhile, the Arab League has warned against the Israeli plans to extend the war now raging in Gaza to the whole region. In a statement made at the end of a special session of the organization's council held at the request of Iraq, the representative of the Palestinian state denounced, as he put it, the U.S. abusive recourse to veto that hampers the adoption by the UN Security Council a resolution forcing the Israeli occupation to stop its war on Gaza. In this respect, he called on the United States to reconsider its biased position that prevent the UN Security Council from assuming its responsibility aimed at ensuring international peace and security. The situation in Gaza and in the Middle East as a whole will be examined later today by the UN Security Council after it failed last week to agree on a draft resolution urging for an unconditional and permanent ceasefire. Let's recall that the situation in the region was also discussed by the G7 group meeting today in Rome. Still in the Middle East, in Lebanon, the Israeli occupation has pursued its bombardments of the capital Beirut and its surroundings, killing 29 people and wounding 67 others. The Israeli occupation's pounding targeted mainly the southern suburb of the capital, whose main districts were virtually emptied of its population. You still listen to Radio Algeria International, and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said that violence against women is getting worse amid conflict-related and climate-related crises. On the occasion of the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, Guterres said every day 140 women and girls are killed by someone close to them, highlighting that around 1 in 3 women is a victim of physical or sexual violence. No country and no environment is spared. Globally, 736 million women, or nearly 1 in 3, have experienced violence at least once in their life. Girls are particularly affected, with 1 in 4 adolescent girls having been abused, while 16% to 58% of women worldwide experience gender-based violence facilitated by technology, while 70% of women in conflict, war, and humanitarian crises experience gender-based violence. UNODC's Executive Director Ghada Wali had this to say on the occasion of the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women.
Every 10 minutes, a woman is killed by someone close to her. Every 10 minutes, we lose a life to the bias, inequality, and indifference that women face. Around the world, violence against women and girls is widespread and alarming. Even now, the clock is ticking towards another tragic death, and too many survivors get no justice and no support. It is time to do better. Laws, policies, and justice institutions must hold every perpetrator accountable and give every victim the chance to come forward safely, with dignity and respect. Data and analysis must form the bedrock of prevention, analyzing past cases to save lives going forward. Technology must work for victims and not against them, through tech-enabled reporting and protection rather than tech-facilitated violence. And every member of society must reject the norms and societal power structures that sustain inequality in our homes, workplaces, and communities. We all have a role and a voice. Governments, civil society, the private sector, our communities, the United Nations, and every single one of us. We need to unite to push for change now. Today, we are launching 16 days of activism to stand against gender-based violence and to let every woman and girl who has faced violence know that she does not stand alone. There is no excuse. There are lives at stake, and every minute counts.
This was on the occasion of the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. The COP29 has wound up without any explicit mention of the transition from fossil fuels, a setback considered worrying by many experts who see it as a step backward in the hope of keeping the planet below 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming. In addition to an agreement on climate finance finally reached in the final hours, the negotiators from around the world meeting in Baku aimed to consider the implementation of the historic agreement reached at the COP28 in Dubai in 2023 on fossil fuels, the main culprits of climate change. In the end, however, the text addressing the issue was not adopted, with countries deploring the fact that it had been stripped of its substance. The rich countries pledged at the COP29 to release $300 billion a year in climate finance for poor countries aroused their anger, but it also reflects a shift in global political realities. At the COP29, Germany and the EU maintained their position as defenders of climate, but insisted on the need for a new approach to the financial aid expected from the historical polluters for the poorest countries. The year 2024 is set to become the hottest on record. Since the COP29, deadly storms have hit the Philippines and Honduras, and Ecuador has declared a national emergency due to drought and forest fires. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International and 2:48 minutes Algiers time. In Romania, exit polls have showed that outgoing Prime Minister Marcel Ciolacu and President of the Social Democratic Party came on top in the first round of the presidential election with 25% of the vote. According to an exit poll carried out by the Center for Urban and Regional Sociology, the leader of the Save Romania Union, Elena Lasconi, followed with 18% of the vote, while the independent Călălin Georgescu took 16%. You still listen to Radio Algeria International, and that's it for our news bulletin. I invite you now to listen to the international event of the week.
The International Event of the Week.
The International Criminal Court ICC issued this week arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant for war crimes and crimes against humanity. In a statement, the court's judges said there were reasonable grounds that the two men bore responsibility for the crimes perpetrated against the Palestinian population in Gaza. They also held the two Israeli officials responsible for the war crime of starvation as a method of warfare and the crimes against humanity of murder, persecution, and other inhumane acts. The ruling was unanimously endorsed by the court's judges, who also rejected the two Israeli officials' request challenging the court's jurisdiction over the occupied Palestinian territories. Observers assert that the ICC's decision constitutes a judicial turning point, although the ruling will have no incidence on the situation in Gaza, as the Israeli occupying authorities will pursue their intense military operations. Asked if the ICC's decision, considered a judicial and strategic turning point, could produce geopolitical effects, our political analyst Hamoud Salhi had the following.
Algeria's ambassador is spot on. A U.S. veto gives carte blanche to the Israelis, allowing them to continue their genocidal activities without any consequences. This is a clear violation of international norms. The U.S. veto freezes United Nations Security Council from assuming its responsibility to protect peace and order globally. And as the Algerian ambassador noted, there was significant concession to pass the resolution, but the United States stood firm. Since October 7, the United States vetoed 4 times a resolution demanding an end to the war in Gaza. To put it in a perspective, this veto is in line with the United States' refusal to condition its military assistance to the Israelis, which sets against U.S. own laws that stipulate that like assistance must not be used to restrict humanitarian aid, among other conditions for using the military assistance that the United States provided to countries. In addition, the United States has provided Israel $14 billion in military assistance without conditions since the war started in Gaza, on top of the annual $3.8 billion Israel receives annually. None of this has been restricted to comply with U.S. laws. By continuing to fully support Israel, the U.S. appears to be encouraging the Israelis to continue pursuing the slaughter of Palestinians, something that the world has condemned, but the United States continue to tolerate.
The ICC's decision was welcomed by the Palestinian authorities, saying that it represents hope and confidence in international law and its institutions, and urged the court's member states to sever contacts and meetings with the Israeli Prime and Defense Ministers. It was also welcomed by the Arab League as a step forward towards the restoration of the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people. In a similar move, Algeria hailed the ICC's decision as a major step and progress towards the fulfillment of the Palestinian people's right to independence and the ending of Israel's non-accountability. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said that he respected the work and independence of the ICC, while South Africa hailed the move as a significant step towards justice for the crimes perpetrated in Palestine. The ICC's decision, which the EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell said was binding on all EU member states, was denounced as outrageous by US President Joe Biden. Several European countries, including France, the Netherlands, Italy, and the United Kingdom, said they would comply with the ICC's ruling that was rejected by the Israeli Prime and Defense Ministers, and other countries, including Hungary and